This is my last night here at home at my dad's house before heading back to New York. I'm allergic to the mold in this house, so I need to get out immediately. But this is the October predictions video that I'm getting out before I head out to my third My Chemical Romance concert in 2 weeks. If you want a little bit of a fit check, this is going to be difficult, and also this video is going to be really, really long, so I don't know how I'm going to show this. But basically, I'm in this top that's too big for me, I'm in these shorts, and I'm in my Gucci shoes. That's the fit. I'm in a parts of 4 necklace. Not going to spend too much time on that because this month is particularly very, very serious. This month is the month. I'd say that the last week of October, first week of November-ish the month is really halfway in October, halfway into November. Like, that is the month, but it does cut into what we're seeing here. And I think that things start out fairly smoothly. Libra season happens, and then by the end of the month, I think that this eclipse season is going to be some of the most chaotic energy that we've seen. I'll give you a little abstract of what I have already filmed, because I had to film this over multiple days because it was so much work, was that Putin looks like he pulls some crazy shit at the end of October. The solar eclipse is right on his ascendant, which does look very, very chaotic, very divisive for him, starting something at the end of the month. Solar eclipses are generally the downfall of leaders, but when it's happening on someone's ascendant, it's not necessarily like them necessarily being the one. It looks like he's enacting something that's taking down. It's very, very dire, October 25th to the end of the month. And also it's very active in Iran's chart, which looks like with Venus and the moon there's a women's issue that this represents, and it's very active in Iran's chart that I think looks like a massive uprising by the end of the month that does likely lead to some adjustments because of the nature of how challenged Iran's chart is, with Mars squaring its Mars. And also I do think that the markets will take a major beating by the end of the month because of the macro instability. So as someone fundraising right now, I'm like, shit, it gets worse. But I do hope that this is helpful. As always, nothing but respect and of admiration for anyone who's in the dynamics that I'm speaking on. I hope that this helps you, and if you are one of those people, do reach out, because I care a lot. And I consulted with a lot of people that I knew who had fled Iran in the 79 to 83 range, and also some people that I know in Iran when I was preparing for the full Iran video, which I will be filming over the next few days once I'm back in New York. So I'm going to end that here. I hope that this was helpful. I send my heart out to anyone. As I said, in these situations, I'm going to put this all together and get to the My Chemical Romance concert. So much love. So I think it's helpful to provide context as for where we are in terms of Bitcoin and the general crypto market as we're heading into October. So I'm filming this part about crypto, Bitcoin, and ETH on the, what fucking date is it? The 26th. So it's not quite yet October, however. A lot of people are quite bullish because we are at this support level here. I have to admit, though, that I do believe given that it's after the new moon and after the upcoming aspects for October, I'm not bullish. I'm not bullish at support. Like, on the record, I'm really not. Especially the end of October. I think that it could be a fairly sideways time during October. I don't see it being good. The time that I would see things improving would be middle of October, from about the 10th until the 24th. I'll get into it, but I'm not someone who... there's a lot of people that are reasonably, they're reasonably bullish. I have to admit, there's a reason for it. However, even looking at this, I can't pretend that I'm going to be longing here at all. I think that we have room to go down. So then switching back to Bitcoin's chart here, I'll start out by describing that we are in the bearish moon phase. Moon phases are not quite as relevant when we are not in a straight up or straight down motion. The moon phases are generally a 2-week swing trade, up after the full moon, down after the new moon. But when we're in a choppy sideways market, it's not that helpful. So if we're in a bull market, new moons tend to be the times to sell and then long really hard during full moons. If we're in a bear market, selling the new moon shorting pretty aggressively, and then moderately longing the full moon is generally a better deal. It's not as helpful in these sideways markets for longer term plays. I think of the new and the full moon as pivot points rather than general firm 2-week dates nowadays, which has worked much better in my own trades. So now going forward to Bitcoin and where we are heading into October. There are some things early on in the month that on the surface are more positive, but I have to admit that there's one transit in the background that does lead me to be fairly bearish overall. So starting on October 1st, Venus is trine Bitcoin's Mercury, which is positive. On the 2nd, Venus is opposite Bitcoin's Moon, which is positive. And on the 3rd, Venus is squaring Bitcoin's Mars, which is positive. Aspects from Venus tend to be positive. However, the reason that I'm not bullish, even in the midst of all those aspects, is because Mars exacts on the 6th is squaring Bitcoin's Saturn, and it's also squaring Bitcoin's Uranus ongoing, but it's really closely squaring Bitcoin's Saturn. This is very bearish, and it's much slower. Mars is slowly moving right now. So I like this in the background longer term throughout the beginning of October. I have difficulty being at all bullish. I'm quite bearish. Mars and Saturn together is never an easy combination. Then on the 9th, we do have a full moon in Aries. This full moon still has Mars squaring Bitcoin's Saturn, and Saturn is on Bitcoin's Chiron. I don't really like this. So as a full moon, we tend to dump into them and pump out of them. I would expect us to keep dumping into the 9th. Pretty clear on that. I do prefer the period after that. I'm going to jump to the 17th when I think that things do get more bullish, because we have Venus trine Bitcoin's Neptune. We then on the 22nd have Venus square Bitcoin's Jupiter. We then on the 22nd as well have the Sun square Bitcoin's Jupiter. On the 23rd, we have Venus trine Bitcoin's Venus. We have the Sun trine Bitcoin's Venus. And on the 25th, we do have Venus square Bitcoin's Mercury, but the 25th is what I think we pump into and then dump out from the 25th onward. So the 25th into the end of the month, I do expect us to have a pretty difficult time. It is a solar eclipse in Scorpio. You can watch my whole video on it, and you can watch my video that will come out closer to the date on it, but it looks atrocious. If you skip to the Putin section of this video, I talk about how it looks like he's doing something batshit around the end of October. The exact date of the 25th is less relevant towards it can be the 25th to the end of October. Solar eclipses in general are so powerfully indicative that to look on the exact date is a little bit missing the forest for the trees, because that energy just reverberates out a few days. So any time from the 25th to the end of the month, I am particularly bearish. On the 28th, Jupiter re-enters Pisces. This is why I do have a tweet talking about October 28th. And if I go over to TradingView again and show this, Jupiter and Pisces were the exact periods of the down market. I will repeat, Jupiter and Pisces were the exact periods of the down market. So Jupiter was in Pisces May until July of 2021. It was also in Pisces January until May of this year. I deleted that basically writing, but January, January until May, it was here. So Jupiter and Pisces were pretty much the exact down market periods, or just periods where things got significantly worse. Not that they didn't keep getting worse, so it's not quite as useful on its own as it is through a combination of things. But Jupiter and Pisces is historically quite bearish, and Jupiter re-entering Pisces on October 28th is clearly not bullish. That coupled with eclipse season makes me extremely bearish for the end of October. I think it's kind of stupid to think that matters are not further escalating in the world in general. So to reiterate, beginning of the month, moderately bearish. It just looks bad with Mars square Bitcoin's Neptune, and I think after the new moon that gives me enough confirmation of I don't think that things look good. Middle of the month, particularly the 15th to the 24th in that area, but the 17th to the 24th in particular, moderately bullish. I think that we will have a moderate recovery. I do not mean, when I mean moderately bullish, by no means do I think bear market over. You have to understand we go up and down to bear market. And then the 25th onward, just massively bearish, just looks fucking horrendous. So going to jump over to ETH and talk about Ethereum here, if we can pull it up. So similarly, the beginning of the month is not bad. On the 2nd, we do have Mars sextiling Ethereum's Uranus. Sextiles are stupid, weak, but sometimes they're the only thing we have, so it can indicate slight better. And also Venus is sextile Ethereum's Sun on the 4th.
I do not think that these are going to overpower things happening in the background. I don't think that those moderate things are going to help out at all. And then on the 9th, we do have the full moon. The full moon is like a local bottom generally, so I expect us to pump into it and then, dump into it and pump out, similar to Bitcoin. There's just not as many aspects for ETH, frankly, during that period, so that's all I got. But then on the 13th, the sun is opposite Ethereum's Uranus. On the 13th, do watch out for some volatility. On the 15th, Venus is opposite Bitcoin's Uranus, which does look like upside volatility. The 18th has Venus squaring Ethereum's Mars, upside volatility. The 19th has Venus square Ethereum's moon, that's positive. The 21st has Venus sextile Ethereum's Jupiter, that is positive. And the 23rd has Venus sextile Ethereum's Venus. So like I said, like sextiles are not as powerful as trines or oppositions or squares on like Venus's behalf. So I'm including these because we didn't have anything stronger to mention for ETH. But I think it does mention that the middle of the month period, especially like the 17th to the 24th, I do think there's going to be a moderate upside recovery. Now on the 25th, we have the solar eclipse in Scorpio, atrocious, like I said. Jupiter is also very close to Ethereum's south node. Now, Jupiter is growth, the south node is release or letting go. So anything bearish coupled with this, I just think Ethereum sell-off. Anything in the news is a sell-off. Anything about anything is a sell-off. Nothing would be a bullish. You know what I mean? Like, we're in the kind of market where nothing is bullish. But anything about the market, anything news-wise is a sell-off. I think some major world geopolitical fuckery end of the month. I just think it looks like major violence, just really bad. So that's that. On the 28th, I will say that Venus is squaring ETH's Sun, and on the 30th, Venus is trying ETH's Neptune. I just don't think that these make up for the fact that the background astrology is horrendous. I do not like the things that are going on end of the month collectively. The general astrology sucks. So any of these positive things that I mention are worth mentioning because people will ask about them if I don't bring them up, but by no means do I think that they're outweighing the more major things. So if we look at ETH right now, I think that we're not even, like, we can go beneath 1,000 easily. Like, I'm looking at this area. So yeah, that's pretty clear about the crypto market. I hope that this is helpful, and this should go very correlatory in line with the fact that the world's geopolitical astrology for the end of the month, pretty challenging too. Now, looking at Biden's chart, it actually seems like things are going well for him early on in the month, that he's making a sudden announcement actually. So as you can see, Venus is crossing his Neptune in the beginning of the month, and it is also trining his Uranus, showing that in his 11th house of groups, of parties, of alliances, of being seen by large masses in the public, he is in the spotlight in a way of representing a party, and he's making an announcement that could seem too good to be true, but is suddenly well received. Like, for example, when it is put out, it is well received. So it's trining his Saturn. Venus will be trining his Saturn as well on the 7th. So it's nothing that I see too shocking, but it's a sudden announcement that is well received, basically. Now, on the 9th, there is a full moon in his chart. It is not the most active in his chart. It is in his 5th house of children and romance. I don't think we're going to hear about it in the news if anything is happening in his life regarding that, so I'm not really paying too much attention to this full moon in terms of Biden. Now, on the 12th, with Mercury conjunct his natal Neptune, this shows an announcement of something idealistic. I would not be surprised if he is announcing something relating to a 2024 approach. I mean, he's been a little weird about announcing running or not. I think because everyone knows he's old as fuck, so he can say all he wants, I'm running, and everyone is like, do we take it seriously or not? So I do see him making some sort of announcement with Mercury conjunct his Neptune, and on the 19th then with Venus squaring his Jupiter. This honestly looks positive for him to start out the month, as if he's doing something that is well received by the general party. So I'm leaning towards it being something that does honor like more liberal principles. Maybe something is passed. He makes an announcement that does look like it is well received on that level. On the 23rd, Venus is then opposite his moon. Again, this looks very positive to start out like the first 3 weeks of the month, basically. But on the 25th is when things do get intense because it is a solar eclipse in his 12th house. Excuse me. I'm not going to edit that out. It's in his 12th house. I'm allergic to this house. If you haven't heard, there's mold all over this house, and so it's getting fixed once I leave next week, though. Just great. No one is ever up here because the room has kept the fucking same since I left when I was 18, so apparently toxic mold everywhere, but we're going to get through it. So this solar eclipse is a huge catalyst new beginning. Solar eclipses are destructive new beginnings, meaning that because some shit is fucked up, there's a new beginning, a new chapter there. This is also conjunct the South Node, which represents release or letting go. So a release of something of his 12th house, which is behind the scenes, hidden, confidential information. Sorry, I'm fucking around with my earrings. I'll stop. Hidden behind the scenes, confidential information is leaked. I don't see any really major, like, if there's a solar eclipse in the 12th house, it's like, oh, you thought, let me release all this. So a release, a very, like, catalyst event. With the moon and Venus there, it does bring in themes of women and of women's issues. So I think that around this time, around the midterms, there could be more coming up around Roe v. Wade and women's issues. Don't be in my comments saying it's a people's issue. I get your point. I'm just literally laying out who would be upset in the streets during something like this. I'm not taking any political anything. I'm just the straight astro. So I do see this likely being a release of confidential information from behind the scenes around him and his life, around things that are regarding even Roe v. Wade, and that repeal meant upsetting people. So I don't see this being a good eclipse. Not that eclipses are ever that good. But the South Node is very close to his Mars, and the South Node being release and Mars ruling his 5th house of kids, I think could be documents and information related to Hunter. It's also ruling the 12th house itself. So this is simply the logical conclusion that if I see something around sudden release and the 5th house is implicated in Biden's chart, I'm going to think what is coming out around Hunter, basically. And yeah, that's what would makes the most sense for Biden. This is the most intense transit in his chart by far. So after that, it's not quite as intense. Even though Jupiter does leave his 5th house of children, I think possibly a further detail to something ending growth-wise that was happening with Hunter. Kamala Harris's chart for this month is very interesting and makes me confirm my thesis that there's going to be world events that do continue to place more importance on her that we will see more clearly early next year. So the first major thing that's happening is that on the 9th there is an Aries full moon, and interestingly enough, Kamala was born under an Aries full moon, but as you can see, hers is at 27 degrees. This full moon will be at 16 degrees. So this is not necessarily too intense or exact for her, but it is very relevant that Mars is approaching her ascendant as there is a full moon in her 11th house, looking like there is increased involvement of her having to go after or be assertive in something, that she might be pursuing something directly, being very fierce or abrupt, in like there's something going on with her that's causing her to ramp up, so to speak. And with this in her 11th house of groups and alliances, I think that there is a kind of release or a high point of an announcement that when Biden was giving does deal with her, deals with something that they're working on, and it looks like she's dealing with this divisive action and is getting recognized. On the 17th, Mars is conjunct her ascendant, and Mars on the ascendant, like I was saying, shows going forward, shows being active and assertive, not in some nebulous way of like, oh, woo-woo, like, okay, sure, everyone can say that. No, this means that literally during this time in your life, you are hauling ass, particularly physically, honestly. I wonder if she's like working out or something during this time. But then on the 21st, it is her solar return, also known as her birthday. This does not mean that day is that particularly significant. So it's just kind of a happy birthday, you could say. But Venus will be opposite her moon, and Venus will be on her sun as well. And Venus is also trine her Saturn. So even though her birthday itself might not be that big of a deal, it does look like things are going very well for her, coincidentally on this day, with Venus conjunct her sun in her solar return. This honestly shows with Venus on someone's sun in their solar return. I could do a full video on this, but like there's a lot of really astounding things in the solar return chart. I'll just go over it briefly. In her solar return chart, she has Venus on her sun exactly. She has Mars on her ascendant nearly exactly. Just very intense, being seen, moving forward with something. Actually, let's get this to the exact degree. Let's see when the exact solar return chart is. Let's make sure that this sun is at, actually, let's move this forward. Actually, we'll need to do hours, I guess. Okay, so sun is at 48 degrees, 28 degrees, 48 minutes. This puts the ascendant in Leo. This puts Mars on her ascendant. Ascendant is in Leo. Moon is right on her Venus, Pluto. Wow, okay. Big year for her. I mean, her zodiacal releasing's big for next year, so yeah. I'll do a full video on her, I think, for next year, because it just looks very substantial. But having a solar return with Mars on your ascendant and Venus on your sun, she's getting something done. She's going after something. Would not be surprised if her power really starts next year. Now on the 24th, she has Venus right on her Mercury as soon as it moves into Scorpio. So it looks like she's also further communicating about an announcement. And then there is the solar eclipse in Scorpio happening on the 25th in her 6th house of people she works with or health issues. So I'm very curious about this one because it's in her 6th house, which is not blatantly around career success. It's more around people who work for you or around you or your health issues. But it's right on her Mercury, and Mercury in her chart is ruling her 4th house of home and family and her 1st house of self. So I think that this is a huge new beginning around herself and her body, actually. As weird as this sounds, I think that she's embarking on a physical journey, that there's something she's solving, some health issue or health dynamic that she's solving, that she's like, I gotta go after this, and she announces it, like she speaks up about it, like she's like, I'm a warrior in this way, and everyone's like, yes, like, you know what I mean, when people are like, I have IBS, yes, or I'm kidding, like it's probably much more intense than that, but it does whenever the 1st house and the 6th house are combined. The 1st house being your physical appearance and the 6th house often being physical health issues chronically. Usually when those two are combined and it's not just your body but also the inner issues of the body, it usually just screams something going on with your health. It doesn't always have to be bad. It could be that you're embarking on a diet or exercise thing. It's not like a chronic, huge illness, but I think that this looks like, yeah, she could be embarking on a new beginning with people that she hires, but more likely this actually, in the middle of a world crisis, she's like, I'm dealing with this issue. So I think that there's an aggressive new start for her and that she might be announcing some type of running initiative. Just with this on her Mercury announcement and Mars on her ascendant, I think it's going to involve her running for something too. I think that it could be Biden, Harris announcing like, oh, this is our next year plan. This is our 2024 vibe, whatever the fuck you call it. I like really don't track politics unless it's for a neutral thing like this. Like I'm just not interested in it. It's just bullshit. I went from being like I want to be a political astrologer to like there could be nothing less grounded in reality. Like it's just whatever. Anyway, on the 28th, Mercury's on her sun. Again, she's announcing something in the middle of a fucking world crisis. She's announcing something. There's a crisis end of the month, like I said. And then on the 30th, it's her Mercury return. So a lot of communication coming out of the White House, a lot of announcement. She's grinding after something right now, and there's a new beginning. Maybe she announces a health issue. Very interesting, though, for her to see. I think we're going to look back. And at this point, Mars is also retrograde on her ascendant. So it's just fucking there. She's like, here I am. I'm going to have to go back and rethink this. Because Mars retrograde is going back to rethink putting yourself out there. She's like, whoa, did I just really do that in the midst of this crisis? Did I just really announce myself like that? So that's all those components together. The US chart is convenient because it's the same rising sign as Biden, and they both have like Cancer placements. So it's just very convenient to know similar areas of the charts that are going to be activated. There's a lot of pretty nice things happening in the very beginning of the month, kind of coinciding with Biden's announcement that do look like there's some like, yes, like in the beginning of the month kind of thing. Venus is squaring the US Venus. As you can see, Venus in Libra, Venus there. The sun is trine the US Uranus. So this sudden announcement beginning of the month is well received. Venus is then squaring the US Jupiter. However, I will say that on the 4th, Mars is exactly conjunct the US Mars. This is longer term, so it's not super specific to the 4th, but Mars hanging around the natal US Mars confirms partisan civil tensions rising around this time. You can come at me and say this is obvious because of midterms. The astrology is showing the obvious because astrology is a mirror for reality. So as midterms approach and likely very high civil tensions as do happen around eclipse seasons, Mars is in the US 7th house. The 7th house in countries' charts tends to show civil divisions or infighting on a partisan level, and Mars natally in the US chart shows that that is generally the number one issue that is present for the entity of the United States. Mars returns emphasize the issue of Mars in a chart. Given that the US is a daytime chart, Mars is the most challenging planet. Putting all that together, the civil tensions that are the hallmarking issue of the US are reaffirmed to be very relevant for this month, especially around the eclipse season, the end of the month when Mars stations retrograde there. So back to the general things happening. I like that Venus is trine the US Uranus on the 6th. I like that, well, actually, I don't really care, but the Sun is trine the US Saturn on the 7th, or sorry, it's conjunct US Saturn on the 7th. This shows very clear authority and seriousness. It's just so many paths showing that Biden and likely Harris are making an announcement early on in the month. Then on the 8th, Mars is squaring the US Neptune. This is another thing that's very ongoing in the background that does show a lot of issues around clarity of information, because Mars in the 7th house, like I just said, shows civil and partisan infighting being the huge issue relevant right now. But Mars is squaring the US Neptune in the 4th, so lack of clarity around truth, around sides, around what the hell is going on is very, very astounding right now. Mars is square Neptune generally in the sky because we're going through our Neptune opposition, which shows just general lack of clarity about the future trajectory. But Mars in basically a Sinistry T square is square Neptune just shows a lot of inaction. If I'm honest, this looks like something dire could be happening end of the month geopolitically and that the US does not act. Like, Mars square Neptune is very much freeze. It's very much, oh my god, my will is everywhere. How the hell do I do this? In someone's chart, Mars Neptune likely shows lack of competition. It can show artistry in movement rather than competition in movement. I have Mars opposite Neptune, very similar to Mars square Neptune. I don't know competition. I often don't really understand how to specifically target like people if there's an issue. I don't understand competition. So seeing Mars Neptune during a time of likely escalation of war is not too great for seeing that we act directly or divisively, not just because Mars is square Neptune by transit, but because Mars is square Neptune in the US chart. I was pointing at the bottom one this whole time. I don't know if my mouse can be seen. I guess it can't be seen. That's so stupid. I just realized that in all these videos, I'm circling the planet as I talk so that it records it, and that doesn't even come up. So you're just going to have to learn the glyphs yourself. Sorry, guys. But it's pretty simple. Venus looks like Venus. Mars looks like Gaia. Like, it's fine. Then on the 11th, Venus is also going to conjoin the US midheaven. Again, Mercury on midheaven, which is publicity, looks like big announcement beginning of the month that Biden and Harris are speaking about. On the 16th, Venus is trine the US Mars. I love to see this. That is very, like, at least we're going, maybe there's a little bit there of something going after something. And then on the 20th, the Mercury is conjunct the US Saturn, very serious communication. On the 20th, Venus is also trine the US Moon, which I do like. The 21st, Venus is squaring the US Pluto. This is where things are getting a little bit rockier as we approach eclipse season. On the 25th, Venus is trine the US Venus, but I don't particularly care because there's a solar eclipse in the US 12th house of behind the scenes hidden information. I will say that it is trine 8th house planets that are very positive, so I think that somehow this does help the US financially, but it could be that there's something around war and there's something that does end up helping the economy because that's the nature of it, but that this confidential information that is leaked does definitely deal with like international and national secrets. So I think that there is a leak of sensitive information. It's happening in Biden's chart. It's happening in the US 12th house. So that does happen. End of the month, we do have two nice things. The Sun is trine the US Venus and Venus is trine the US Jupiter. But I don't think that makes up for just the general in your face. Mars is squaring the US Neptune and there's a fucking solar eclipse in the 12th house. Then Mars stations retrograde, squaring the US Neptune as well, which is just like not acting clearly. There's a lack of clear solving of issues, whether it's the partisan infighting that likely does happen after the midterm elections. And I think that happening around the midterm elections, this happening right before the midterm elections, Mars going retrograde does show just lack of action, lack of direct action, and major sensitive information being leaked nearing the end of October with that eclipse. In pulling up Putin's chart, I realized that I did not clarify what actually happened last time there were eclipses in this part of his chart in 2002 to 2003. So just a quick Google search back testing, seeing what was happening in his chart last time, or in his life last time the nodes were where they are now. Basically, 2002 to 2003, the north node was in his 7th house in Taurus, south node was in his 1st house. This was where there was a referendum held in Chechnya, and it declared that there was a part of Russia, and the region did require autonomy. So it does seem like there's still ongoing retaliation and attacks after that, even after Chechnya was declared part of Russia. But that was a time when there was an addition of Chechnya to Russia. I find that a little bit interesting that happened during this period when likely, I don't want to jump, I guess I can just jump into this. It just seems like there's no great way out of the Russian-Ukraine crisis. What is a win, what is a loss? Not even saying that it's a cop-out, but any way you cut it, there probably will be, I just feel like there will be something that Russia takes. And so I think that with the last time that this transit occurred, which is the major defining transit of the month, being when Chechnya was added to Russia, that's just data to know. So starting out at the beginning of this October, not October 2003, actually, let's go beginning of this October. There's some nice things happening in his chart. Honestly, Venus is trine his moon and Mars is trine his Neptune. Now, having Mars trine his Neptune pretty constantly for a while here is more supportive than it is in other charts. And on the 7th, it is his solar return, so it is his birthday. Venus is very close to the sun during his solar return. Now, actually, out of curiosity, because this is the longer video, so don't feel bad doing this, I want to see what his exact solar return is. So he was born on the 7th, but his solar return is actually, let's do this in Moscow, Russia. So you can see how I do solar return charts by watching me do this. So this is, my face is just completely in here at the camera. I don't care right now. His exact solar return is then going to be at, it is at 8:13 a.m. on the 7th in Moscow. So the sun and Venus are right on his natal sun. He has Mars trine his Neptune. He has Saturn on his midheaven. He has Uranus on his Jupiter, which is just, a lot. If I look at the solar return alone, it's a Libra ascendant ruled by Venus in the 1st house conjunct the sun. It's not a bad solar return, honestly. There's a lot going on in the 1st house, which kind of confirms that he is the focus, and that I think that this particular eclipse coming up on the 25th is of his doing. He's literally the one that's causing something. Now, this is interesting for financially, Uranus on his north node. That's interesting for finances. Or Uranus on the north node in this area. But that 9th house Mars shows that international relations is the most challenging thing. Squaring Neptune in the 6th, people he works with are deluding him around international relations. We're not surprised. Obviously the people he works with are giving him more supportive information than, the world. So full moon in Aries is on the 9th. It is a letting go happening in his 6th house of people who work for him or health issues even. I think for him it's more to do with people who work for him. The sun is in his 12th house of behind the scenes hidden information, and this full moon is right on his Saturn. It's nearly exactly on his Saturn. Saturn in his chart is ruling his 3rd house of communication and 4th house of homeland or of boundaries, and Saturn is also trine his natal Saturn right now is trine his natal Saturn. So Saturn on his north node, as I've explained, is a commitment to moving forward with what he's doing. It's like an ingraining or not letting up, which we can see right now. But I think that it also shows that with Mars right on his lot of fortune, there's some financial tie that's very fortunate right now happening with him. Something that, even though there's difficult things going on, Mars is opposite his natal Mars. It's going to station retrograde opposite his natal Mars. It's very challenging. It does look like with this full moon, there's a release of information on his end that does involve positive financial ties. I cannot help but think of the tie to Russia with the like shared currency they're doing, or like China-Russia thing. Not that China is playing a full Russian support card. Nowhere can do that in the world right now. But I do think that it looks like there's something fortunate financially happening for him in his 8th house, which, I mean, Mars will be opposite his natal Mars in the 2nd, so it's not all great by any means. But there's less going on in his chart that is, like, blatantly like, oh no, and more of, oh god, what does this guy do end of the month, when we get to that in a second. So on the 10th, Venus is conjunct his Sun. The Sun is also conjunct his Saturn during that time, so very serious behind-the-scenes activity going on that seems to be released end of the month. On the 13th, Venus is trine his Saturn. Venus is also squaring his Uranus, which does look a bit chaotic. So around the 13th, there could be something kind of that flares up that then is resolved quickly after. On the 14th, the Sun is conjunct his Neptune. On the 16th, Venus is conjunct his Neptune. On the 16th, Venus is conjunct his Mercury, and the Sun is conjunct his Mercury. 20th, Mercury's on his Sun. 22nd, Mercury's on his Saturn. There's a ton going on in his 12th house of behind-the-scenes hidden information. I'll just sum it up at that there's a ton going on behind the scenes that is largely... Sorry, I'm still moldy bullshit recovering. There's a ton going on behind the scenes that seems to be on his angle, like a positive growth behind the scenes for him, that he then likely announces or releases under the solar eclipse on the 25th. This is right on his ascendant. Like, there's no way to not stress this, that a solar eclipse right on someone's ascendant with the south node on your Venus is like, what the hell are you doing? What are you choosing to do? Because the first house is often you choosing to do something. It is you going after something. It is you making a huge catalyst, here I am statement or action. In his end, it would be actions. I do want to note that the south node is an indicator of decrease or release. Venus in his chart is ruling his 7th house of opponents and also his 12th house of behind-the-scenes information. So we see there being behind-the-scenes information released as it relates to an opponent, obviously Ukraine. This seems fairly clear. There's something that he was working on during October leading up to this that he is now like, I can announce this, I can share this. And it looks very much he is the agent doing this. There's no one's chart that is as active as this. Mars is also opposite his natal Mars, which is quite challenging, specifically in financial means as it relates to Mars is also, financial means there's, of course, like you can, a fucking course challenging in the world. Uranus is on his Jupiter in the 7th house. So Jupiter in the 7th house is referring to a very substantial partner or opponent. Jupiter is ruling his 2nd house of finances and his 5th house of children or romance. I don't see that being that relevant for this right now. I don't think that's that relevant, but I do see it being Uranus chaos on the 7th house. Jupiter is like chaos expansion of this dynamic with Ukraine. Like, without a doubt, he pulls some shit around the 25th to the end of the month. It's also his Mercury return that day, so big speech announcement. On the 25th, Venus is on his ascendant, and then on the 26th, the Sun is on his ascendant, and on the 31st, Mercury is on his ascendant. So, like, major, he is being heard, seen. He's just, a lot's been worked on behind the scenes that he's now releasing. Russia's chart is not quite as active. There are some things going on, yes, as with all fixed sign placements major, but it's not quite the same as Putin's, where I see it being major agencies taken by Putin for this October. Like, he's doing something very crazy end of the month. On the 1st, we do have the Sun squaring Russia's Venus, slight upside, slight support. The 3rd, Venus trine its Saturn. 9th, Venus square its Uranus, so I do see the intensity picking up middle of the month. And on the 11th, Mercury is conjunct Russia's IC. I think that this is in line with this is in line with announcement or just verbal communication happening around the 11th on behalf of Russia, likely Putin. But I'll jump forward to the 25th. It's really the relevant time. I'm not seeing too much going on like Russia. This eclipse is in the 4th house of home, nation, like boundaries, and it's more active in Putin's chart, but it is a disruptive new beginning as it pertains to the boundaries and like nation nation itself. When there's the 4th house activated in a country's chart, it deals with the physical boundaries of the nation. So this makes quite sense with something chaotic happening with Putin pulling something as regards Ukraine, if they're sharing a border and it does impact them as a country identity. So there's some nice things happening for Zelensky too to start out the month. So I do think that the very beginning of October is a little bit quieter because I see all these generally mildly supportive aspects for every world leader. I see it for Putin, I see it for Zelensky. So it's like I don't see anything that's really alarming the very beginning of October, like first, second, third. On the 3rd, Venus is trine his sun and Venus is trine his Venus. Then on the 6th, Mars is exactly conjunct his ascendant. So similar to Kamala Harris, having Mars on the ascendant during this time shows incredible, assertive, confident, aggressive activity that has to be undergone. For him, this is self-explanatory. Like, I'm not surprised that Mars is on his ascendant, if you understand Mars being action and aggressive and the ascendant being identity. So I'm not surprised by that. On the 9th, the sun will conjoin his Pluto, which is fairly intense, and there's a full moon in Aries during this time. Now, this full moon in Aries is in his 11th house of party affiliation, of people he's joined with, of groups or international associations he's part of. But I think that this Mars on there really speaks to him doing something like standing up and representing a group. Maybe it's NATO, maybe it's the EU. I know he's not a part, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that something he's doing is backed by them and there's a high point of recognition during this time. So this is fairly active in his chart. Venus and the sun are on his Pluto, which does show well-received powerful transformation and provocation on his part. So I see it being a very active full moon, but not it's one where he's being aggressive with statements or representing a larger group. It's much more in his chart than it is some of the other charts. On the 12th, Venus is then on his Pluto. Again, intensity in whatever he's representing and provoking the world with. On the 20th, Venus is trine his Jupiter, so that is fairly supportive. But if we jump to the 25th, this solar eclipse in Scorpio is opposite his natal Chiron in the 12th. And if the 12th house is behind the scenes and Chiron can be a vulnerability or a trigger point, it looks like this is literally right in someone's blind spot. That's the way that I would say this, is that this is happening in his 6th house of physical health and also people who work for him. So I would put this together as possibly someone who works for him or his closest cabinet members are betraying him in a way that does show that he had a blind spot, and possibly that person or people are conspiring with Russia. Because if there's a 6th house eclipse, it's revealing something about the people that you work with. It's a huge new understanding, new beginning, new trajectory. It could also be health, but I don't see that being as relevant for him if he's had multiple people that he's had to let go of already. Opposite Chiron, which is that's a very wounded, sensitive point in his 12th house. That's okay, so something that you were unaware of, that you did not know, especially because 12th house is hidden enemies. It looks like there was someone working with him that was a hidden enemy, basically, on this 25th eclipse, and that this might tie in with what Putin is announcing and showing in the world. The 27th, Venus is squaring his sun and Venus, but I don't think that nearly outweighs what's going on with his chart, with showing that at first, he's representing some party, he's well received, and then by the end of the month, there's definitely some blind spot indicated. On the 5th for Ukraine, if we jump to Ukraine's chart, on the 5th, Mercury is conjunct its Mars, so this goes in line with the aggressive announcement or Zelensky being very upfront and in the world. The themes around this, it's Biden is speaking up early month, Ukraine speaking up early in the month, Zelensky speaking up. It's all these places are speaking up early in the month, almost there's some announcement or campaign made, and that it's generally well received. The 7th, Venus is square Ukraine's Uranus, looks a little bit chaotic. On the 9th, Mars is trine its moon, which is helpful. The 17th, Venus is trine its moon, which is helpful. The 21st is when things start to get intense because Mars is squaring Ukraine's Mars. Notice that Mars is at 25 degrees in Ukraine's chart. Mars is at 25 degrees of Gemini. This is very indicative of, attention. This is bad. Mars is 25 degrees, 26 degrees, immutable signs in nearly all of the charts, in Putin and Russia's and Ukraine's. So this Mars just nonstop T-square action is really evident. You can go back and okay, so you can see this. Let me show this. Mars at 25 degrees of Virgo, squaring Mars and Gemini at 25 degrees. If we go to Zelensky, let's see. Mars, and Mars is not. Okay, so Zelensky is the one outlier. If we go to Russia, Mars at 19 degrees. Mars and Gemini still tightly opposite that, very, very much within range. If we go to Putin's chart, Mars at 26 degrees, Mars opposite that. So having all these horrible Mars aspects is just reiterating the fighting, the atrocity, basically. So that is very, very evident for Ukraine during this time. Venus is also squaring Ukraine's Saturn, which is an aspect of it's both long-term oversight and like delaying gratification, but also tensions financially. Like they're not getting help financially. They're showing Saturn in the second squaring. They're like being helped out by people, but not really financially as much as, you know, they might want or need. The 25th is the solar eclipse in Scorpio. It's happening in the 11th house of groups and allies. This is a huge new beginning, new commitment to allies, to perception in the world, but it's not as intense as it is in Putin's chart by far. Pluto has also just stationed direct on Ukraine's ascendant. This is the most major thing, in my opinion, for Ukraine, is that Pluto on the ascendant shows a transformation of the identity of the country. Duh, no brainer, but astrology is showing that. You can watch my full video on Pluto crossing the ascendant for a better idea of how intense this is in an entity's life, whether that is, you know, a nation or a person. If you're a Capricorn rising, you experience this or are experiencing it. So Pluto stationing direct on their ascendant during this time is like the transformation is happening. It looks very dire. I'm not someone who thinks that there is going to be one winner, one loser in this kind of thing. It's not so easy as that, but like this looks really, really intense for Putin pulling some shit the end of the month. So I am tracking the astrology of Iran. I will do a full video on this because there are several charts that we can use for looking at Iran and the details right now, and I'm going to do a full video on that. The chart I am mostly using, I'll quickly explain, is the official Republic chart, which was when the Republic was announced and declared on April 1st, 79 at 3 p.m., which is anecdotal but very widely recognized for 3-ish p.m. It doesn't change that much because the ascendant is going to be mid-Leo no matter what. There's not a weird time issue. 3 p.m. is acceptable. Now, for the chart of Iran, some people are using the return of Khomeini. I believe it's on February 1st, 1979. I don't think that chart represents the entity of the nation, so I am a little confused with why that chart is sometimes as used as the official Republic chart. I understand that his return did mark, like, it was a major turning point, but it's not the nation's chart, so I'm not using that to represent the nation and what's happening with Iran during this October. So the major thing that's happening the whole month is that Mars is square Iran's Mars and Mercury. So this Mars retrograde that's going to happen is also going to come back and square this Mars-Mercury here. So as well as all of these charts, Mars is a country with a difficult planet at 25 degrees, which is like Putin, Ukraine, Russia, they all had Mars around 20 to 25, 19 to 25, 19 to 26 degrees, basically, if you look at the span of Russia to Putin's 20, whatever. They all had Mars in a square aspect to Mars in the sky right now. So this goes to show that this will be an issue that, like, with Mars squaring Mercury as well, this does show the news coverage. It shows the, like, Mercury is also debilitated and in its fall in Iran's chart. So I think that's interesting given the country has so much, like, censorship and the news is so heavily, censored, essentially. So Mars squaring this does show ongoing that there are issues with what's being kept hidden, because this is the 8th house of hidden things. The 8th house is what is willingly hidden. The 12th house is what is unknown to us. So Mars is also ruling the 9th house of international affairs and the 4th house of home and boundaries. So yeah, the external 11th house, like party affiliations and how it's perceived by the world because of what they're hiding, it's poor. Like, that's pretty easy to put that together. But yeah, Mars squaring Iran's Mars is a major challenge here, as well as Saturn's, like, station is retrograde right now and will station right on Iran's descendant. Now, like the US chart, when difficult planets are in the 7th house in the country chart of Iran here, there is partisan fighting and civil issues, often protests. This time it's Saturn, which is a little bit more underlying foundations rather than Mars, which is like bickering, and you can see the difference in the matters that are discussed in, like, Iran versus US fighting. So Saturn on Iran's descendant, which doesn't need to be too exact, because even if this 3 p.m. time is rounded 10, 15, 20 minutes, Saturn is still very close to wherever the descendant is here, showing that the seriousness of going back to reconsider and the seriousness of what protests are happening, this is very, I want to say, ingrained right now. This is not going to end anytime soon. Let me see when Saturn exactly stations direct to give a little bit more time frame of that before I do the full video. Saturn is direct by the end of October. The end of October will be when there is more clarity on steps that are being taken to end the protests as Saturn crosses. But Saturn being like right on the descendant, that is just, that's very, very provocative. So starting out the month, Mars is opposite Iran's Neptune. This does show lack of action on behalf of a leader. Like their actions are not clear, their actions are not definitive. There's some general like nice things going on, but the most intense things as well is that the Sun, Venus, they will be on Iran's Pluto, planet of transformation. So the Sun and Venus on Iran's Pluto in the third house does show that, honestly, transformative good news, positive news could come out around the 12th to the 13th. Just like something could be released that is some good news. I don't think it'll be behalf on like the Iranian government. Like it's not like they're going to do anything, but like some news could be coming out. Then on the 22nd, Venus is square Iran's Jupiter. I do actually like that. I do like seeing Venus square Iran's Jupiter, even though I don't think that this is on the, let me see, this is on the 22nd. I don't think that that makes up for the ongoing things of Mars squaring their natal Mars, which is exact right now. Mars will be exactly square Iran's natal Mars as we lead into the eclipse on the 25th. Now, this eclipse is right on their IC, the lowest part of the chart, the literal angle of foundations of security of in a person's chart. It's like intimate family life. So in a nation's chart, it's the foundations of the country territorially, value-wise. Having a solar eclipse there conjunct Venus and the moon shows a large-scale new beginning of letting go around something around women. I think that by the end of the month, there could be some huge uprising demand of removal of the hijab. Like there is some, like literally the country is mobilized. Not removal of the hijab, but like removal of the, you have to wear this in all government buildings, which like luckily for the video I'm doing, I have all the dates of when it like required like government buildings, then everywhere, like you, like removal of the requirement to wear it in government buildings, out in the street, like all these things. I think that by the end of the month, there will be a clear, because with Venus and the moon being there, that's very intense for something regarding women's issues. And with the South Node being removal and this happening on the IC, it's going to be like a demand for that happening. And world events often escalate together. So it's kind of like, yes, the US midterms are coming up. It looks like Russia's pulling some BS. And it looks like by the end of the month, the removal of the requirement for the hijab is just very, very much contested, to say the least. And there's like a catalyst event that leads that into an entire movement like never before seen. On the 26th, Venus is trine Iran's Venus. I think this is very, very evident of some support regarding women. Like this looks, it doesn't look like the authority is helping this, but it looks like the women themselves, because solar eclipse, moon is on Uranus during this time, very chaotic. And on the 28th, Jupiter re-enters Pisces. Now, this will immediately trine Iran's Jupiter, which is very positive, and it will cross Iran's Mercury and Mars during this time. So the last 2 months of the year look at like a lot of going back to change this very aggressive, violent news, Mars, Mercury. So then by the end of the month as well, Mars stations direct squaring their natal Mars. This is not easy. This is very challenging. Mars retrograde exactly squaring this is like, oh my God, there's a lot of going back to rethink that issue. But I think that it does show that there's a demand made. And I don't think it looks without like violence and chaos. I think that's very clear with the solar eclipse opposite Uranus in this configuration. There's going to be a lot of chaos, but there is a demand made by the end of the month where the requirement needs to be lifted, and like there's a like the fighting back doesn't stop. Regarding that, I'm gonna do the full video on it, but like my heart goes out to all the women in Iran. Yeah, just total support. This is one part where I actually will say, just I will draw like it has nothing to do with my predictions. My predictions incorporate what I see, but just on a personal level, like there's no way around that being what I would support, especially given that I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and I also grew up around Persian families. So like, know that if you're like, why aren't you sharing, why aren't you doing anything, I am researching this video so I can provide value. So and side note, I'm going to mention this in that video more, but like, the coming after influencers, public figures for either sharing or not sharing support around things is fucking ridiculous. You have no idea how someone's helping or not helping in their real life. So don't do that. Miss me with that. But this is the last thing I'm going to mention. I'm going to tie it all together. But it does look like both Russia, Ukraine ramps up end of the month because of Putin, and in Iran, there's major there's just major demand catalyst in regarding this issue with the hijab. Sorry, I'm very tired with the way that I spoke with all that. No, that was a really long one. If you got through it, I appreciate you. If you, feel free to use timestamps. I need to start putting that on every video, just the chapters and everything. If you have any video recommendations or anything that you would like, feel free to leave it down below. I'm going to be filming a transit video after this. I'm not sure what transit video I'm going to decide to do, but I'm going to ask around so within the next 10 minutes I can get that up and run off to the concert. But I do hope that this is helpful. I hope that this helps people who are in those situations. And if you do like this, do all the things like subscribe, lightly tap the whatever bells are on your screen, whatever. Love the marinara sauce, and see you in the next one.